Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 141st episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this episode, I'd like to revisit the concept of life and tie it to dimensions. Now, I've touched upon these topics here and there across my videos, but I wanted to do a video which ties everything together in a more comprehensive way because, recently I've been thinking about this a little bit more. And I just had some precisions to make to the model. So let's dive straight in. As I've said in the previous videos, if you watch the video on the origins of life that I've posted, what I'm saying is that essentially life is very special. It's the gateway between existence, the realm of existence, and experience. So basically in existence you have zero and infinity, which go yin and yang on each other, which is basically they just switch places. Infinity goes back to zero, zero goes back to infinity, and they're locked into this kind of pattern. And life is the gateway which breaks, with which you can transition from existence into an experience. And it does so by creating a sort of an interference pattern of a kind of non-determinism, which is kind of like an algorithm, like an interference pattern, which is just unpredictability. And that manifests as the quantum properties of matter, which is basically life. Because life exists in this universe, it sort of instills its non-deterministic characteristic to everything around it. So it's almost like you're giving life to matter because there's life in the universe. And if life didn't exist in the universe, then the universe would resume perfect symmetry and would collapse onto each other because, everything would be balanced, everything would be equal. And what life enables, what enables the universe to exist is for life to have this kind of interference pattern quality of like tweaking vibrations or going a little bit more to the right and to the left, this kind of unbalance, which is non-determinism. And obviously then the form of life to me was water, which is why in the Bible it says, God was on the surface of God's face was on the surface of the water or something like that in Genesis, because water is basically vibrations made visible or physical. Just take any water, still water, and shake it up, and you'll see that your energy, your kinetic energy, then your energy materializes as the water sort of that takes the shape of the energy that you've instilled into it. But there's a few extra things. It's when we imagine water, we imagine this in a three-dimensional space. That is water as we see it, as from our human perspective. But from my perspective, it's not even water, it's more liquid, because don't forget that matter doesn't even exist at this point. Life is essentially like living vibration, you could say, a living vibration, or a vibration that has a specific experience of being one vibration and not another vibration, which is what it means to break out of infinity, where all vibrations exist superimposed on each other. And so life is like, it's almost like you focus your attention on just this one vibration, and it takes a kind of more physical form. But it's liquid, and it's not in a three-dimensional space. It's actually maybe just in a one-dimensional space, or something like that. And that's something that I haven't quite cracked yet. But life as we see it now, that is unicellular organisms, these kind of little, they live in a two-dimensional world. And I had this intuition a long time before. I even thought of like a baby when it's born perceives itself in two dimensions, as if you'd see it squashed from the head, like the head basically squashed down onto the feet, and you'd see it like from a camera looking at it from the top, and everything just being compressed. And it's almost like a baby has its heart inside its brain, kind of like why they have this hole in the middle of their skulls. And they're so emotional, and they're like, it's basically, they don't see themselves as three-dimensional. They see themselves as two-dimensional, and like basically their parents just stretched them out into the three-dimensional world so that they perceive themselves as three-dimensional creatures. So a living cell is two-dimensional. It lives in a two-dimensional reality. And you'd say, well, that's bollocks, because obviously, unicellular organisms, they float around in the air and blah, blah, blah. But what I mean is, from their subjective perspective, what they're doing is they're just surfing on this two-dimensional plane, and you seeing it from the outside, you can see that. You can see them going up, going down, and all that stuff. But from their subjective perception, they're just surfing on the same two-dimensional plane. And you're the one as a human that can model, and because you're residing in a three-dimensional reality, you can model that living cell that is maybe floating around in the air or something, as going up or going down. But from its subjective perspective, it's on the same two-dimensional plane all the way through. And certain things come into its perception on that 2D plane, but they have no consciousness of what's above it or below it. They're on this two-dimensional plane all the time. And the reason why you have intersections between different two-dimensional planes, like for instance, you'd have another living cell that's on another two-dimensional plane here, like from your human perspective, it would be above the other one. And the reason why these two can interact is because you, as a human, you're creating this three-dimensional stable matrix for that to happen. So, and this maybe I should actually, in the title, I should actually add that. All the people that say that the earth is flat, actually, I believe they're tapping into that kind of quote-unquote information. That is, the earth was flat until the human, or actually not the human, but basically, well, yes, the human, because as you will find out later on in this video, we don't have this kind of evolution, progressive evolution and linear time. Everything sort of comes into focus instantly, and various structures in the universe appear nearly instantly, which is like harmonics on the piano, where if you strike one note, all the other notes that are in the same octave, in higher octaves, but the same note, will enter into sympathetic resonance. You call it sympathetic resonance. But anyways, what I mean is, because, we have creatures like us that have two eyes and all this stuff, we have the ability to merge billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of two-dimensional flat realities and create a coherent three-dimensional reality out of it. Now, so one other thing that I had as a kind of a revelation is that, and I've talked about this in other videos, when you see a living cell splitting in two, or multiplying, or this cellular division, from your human perspective, you see the cell divide in half, right? Or you could say multiply or reproduce, whatever you want to call it. What's actually happening, in my mind, is what you're actually witnessing is life's non-determinism. Determinism. Well, anyways, non-determinism. That is, it's almost as if a cellular division is not the cell replicating itself. It is not reproduction. It is hesitation and the split into two timelines, separate timelines. So it's as if the cell, which is in the same kind of two-dimensional universe or reality, At one point in its experience, hesitates whether it should go left or it should go right. And that results, from your human perspective observing it, as that takes the form of a cellular division, when what actually happened is it's almost like the cell hesitated whether it should go right and it should go left, and it went both ways. It went both ways. And so now each of these cells is now on its own timeline, so to speak. And before there were any humans, those two timelines were actually like two copies of the universe that were not necessarily interacting with it. So when, some esoteric people say that life is just one gigantic tree, where we all come from the same sort of cell that multiplied, and it's actually a time kind of tree, timeline kind of tree, which is all of the cells are just copies of the original one that interact with themselves from another timeline. So it's as if the first cellular division was a split between two timelines, and then at some point, maybe those two timelines interacted together at some point and exchanged information or whatever, and then they split again, and they joined again, and maybe met here, and then they split again. And you as a human, you create a three-dimensional matrix for seeing this as being part of the same three-dimensional unit, like timeline, continuous timeline, when in fact, these are completely separate two-dimensional timelines, and it's as if each cell was living in its own version of the universe, of the entire universe. And it carried the entire universe with it. And so whenever they interact, whenever two cells, two unicellular organisms interact, it's as if two universes interacted with each other. So now let me just go back to this kind of harmonics principle and everything emerging at the same time. That is, life is kind of, the way the universe structures itself is that everything sort of appears instantly, like you have life, you have humans, or human, or it's actually not even human. It's, I don't even know how to say that. Well, some of these structures are bridges between two realities. Like life is the bridge between, chemistry and biology, and humans is the bridge between biology and thought, or the immaterial realm. And so it's as if you had thought, you had biology, you had chemistry here, and so these life or humans, they didn't necessarily have a form. It's just that they took a form as the universe sort of experienced itself more and more. It's like what I said on the first slide, that water, it was like almost like a living vibration, as it interacted with itself, it's almost like if a vibration became alive and then interacted with itself, like this is a vibration that was in a one-dimensional reality. This one was also in its own one-dimensional reality. And then life is what enables the interaction of these on a two-dimensional plane. And that's what you call like these unicellular organisms. And then three-dimensional realities like humans, and they enable the interaction of living organisms to interact with each other in their own respective two-dimensional planes. They're the link that creates a coherence between trillions and trillions of slices of two-dimensional reality. And then whatever is beyond us, which is the being that humans are but a part of, is like a five-dimensional being or reality that creates a space in which three-dimensional humans can interact with each other in a coherent way. But again, it's not even like we're different people. It's almost like if each human is but a different timeline of the same template, which is the first human, Adam and Eve, or whatever you want to call it. It's almost as if we're all Adams and Eves, but splitting into 10 billion different three-dimensional timelines in this instance, and the being that we're a part of resides in a five-dimensional reality, and they can create this stable matrix whereby all of these timelines can interact with each other, and you can meet a copy or a version of you from another timeline, which takes the form of your neighbor, a friend, or whatever. And this is all just like, yeah, it's really so hard to explain. It's just like it's like this focus effect of a camera where everything sort of becomes focused at the same time. It's almost as if there were some seeds that were planted at specific moments whereby the form of a human, the interface, the way we perceive things subjectively, like the way we model reality, the way we see, the way we hear, all of that stuff evolves through this interaction of life with itself, basically. And the interface is only designed for that process to be perfected to the point where the universe can continuously be that which it is not. So this is really very deep esoteric territory, but it's almost as if automatically when you create one side of a coin, you automatically create the other side. So if you have infinity as in everything that's there all at once, you also have everything that is not infinity, that is created at the same time. And what we're experiencing at every single moment is not infinity. That is, the first vibration that became alive, so to speak, it was not infinite. And it resided in a reality where, which is just the flip side of the coin of infinity or everything. Here it's just not everything. So if you're just one vibration, you're not every vibration, and that makes sense. But in order to keep not being everything, you have to create a certain strategy. To keep doing that. Not be yourself, not be yourself, not be infinite, not be infinite, not be infinite, continuously. And right now, as a human, you're experiencing not being everything. You're experiencing being yourself, and then the next second, again, you're going to be not everything, but not the same thing that you were just a minute ago. You're going to be, again, something different, but still not everything. And this is where it becomes really interesting, is that the sum of everything that you're not, everything that is not infinity, equals to infinity. That is, if you have infinity, is infinity equal to 1? No. Is infinity equal to 2? No. Is infinity equal to the experience you're having right now at time t? No. Is infinity equal to what you're experiencing at t plus 1? No. But is infinity equal to everything that it is not? All of what infinity isn't is ultimately what infinity is. And that's where you enter into this non-duality, where everything collapses onto each other, where all of these concepts sort of collapse onto each other. And that's beyond concept. And every time something emerges from the world of non-form, if it emerges as something, it'll automatically emerge as the other thing. It's just like you cannot create one side of a coin without creating the other. They both come into existence at the same time. And so every single opposite automatically creates, every single concept automatically creates its opposite concept. But ultimately, they are one and the same. And this is what I'm trying to illustrate here. And what I mean by this is that, why is this important? Because in order to experience everything that you're not, you have to give yourself some kinds of strategies. And the strategy, the way that I see it, is the interface that we have right now as humans, the form that life took as a living cell instead of just being, living light or something, is instrumental in continuously being that which infinity isn't, to the point where it will be infinity again. Because obviously, the more you are that which you are not, the more you become that which you are. So, yeah, again, I'm blowing my own mind here. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's just like this focus effect of a camera, where everything becomes sharper and sharper. That's what's happening, is that this part of everything that infinity is not is becoming larger and larger, to the point where it's becoming more and more like it's like infinity, through the whole experience of like life, humans, and all that stuff. But what's really interesting here, so first of all, the human being is a very, very interesting structure, because from this perspective, where unicellular organisms live in a two-dimensional reality, a human being is basically an envelope for tying together or creating a coherence between trillions and trillions of two-dimensional parallel timelines, if you will. So within your body, when your cells multiply, your body is the structure which manages to stitch those different timelines in a coherent kind of whole. So you are a cellular multiverse. That's how I call it, like a walking, talking cellular multiverse. You manage to create a coherent timeline for trillions and trillions of cells. Hence why, when you're walking, for instance, somewhere where you don't have your foot that goes in one direction and your hand that goes in another direction, they all move in this kind of same direction. And your skin basically is like almost this barrier between an outer multidimensional reality from your cell's point of view and you. So you, as the person that is in charge of your body, you are experiencing reality in this three-dimensional linear time kind of fashion, but the inner experience of your individual cells is still two-dimensional. And your skin is this kind of barrier that converts outer events, which are three-dimensional linear time-space, into an inner reality, which is two-dimensional and is full of biology and chemistry and all these stuff. And your skin is like this universal translator between an outer 3D reality, which your cells would not be able to understand, and then it takes the form through the barrier of your skin. It takes a certain form. It's like converted into a two-dimensional experience to your cells. So for instance, imagine somebody hits you with a stick. Your cells are not going to understand what just happened. They're not going to, you cannot explain to them you've just been hit by a stick. Your skin, the moment that the stick just touches your skin, that event is then converted into a two-dimensional, into trillions and trillions or billions and billions of two-dimensional experiences, which take the form of all kinds of chemical reactions and biology and all that stuff. But the way you perceive it is completely different from the way that your cells sort of subjectively experience it in their two-dimensional reality. It's almost as if, taking a hit from a stick is like breaking a multiverse, or like plenty of planets that take a hit from, I don't know, like two multiverse collapsing with another multiverse. I mean, I don't even know how to call that in essence. But the reason why that's important is now transpose that same logic to human beings themselves. So now imagine that you as a human, every time you hesitate on taking an action, for instance, or doing something, you're actually doing both. You multiply into two parallel three-dimensional realities, and you experience both choices, both things that you thought about. So let's say you experience, you think about, you hesitate between taking one job or taking the other. And just by doing that, you've actually split into two timelines where you're going to get to experience that, but from your subjective perspective, you will have this illusion of a continuity in your life, when as a matter of fact, your actual life, the way it actually looks, is like this huge fractal that branches out with, billions and millions of versions of yourselves in parallel three-dimensional timelines, which get to experience everything that you've ever hesitated upon, whether it's different flavors of ice cream or taking out different jobs or whatever. And then a being, let's say that you're like your soul or something like that, is a being that resides in a five-dimensional reality, or I would say five-dimensional reality, because four-dimensional is space plus time, and 5D is where time actually it's almost like this interface where you can see all of these timelines like from the same perspective as you look at cellular divisions, where you see them, branching out and going about their own business in their own way, in their own direction, but you can sort of see it as a coherent experience, where they see it as a split in their timelines and being in sort of different realities. So it's as if your soul can see all of that, and hence why it's important to not worry too much about the choices you didn't make, because you've ultimately made them. If anytime you've hesitated, anytime you've felt you had a choice, you've experienced both choices at a level which is not conscious to you as a human, having this one experience. You only get to experience like this one branch, but your soul actually sees that you've experienced all of them. And so now this brings me to this whole idea of humans transitioning into 5D and all that stuff, and spirituality. And that's actually, it's like almost like the planet Earth as a global collective organism that also has plenty of different timelines. And this kind of very higher dimensional being is capable, again, of seeing all the parallel timelines of planet Earth, and then manages to create a way for those different timelines to interact with each other. Just like you as a human, thanks to you get to create or stabilize a dimension in which unicellular organisms in their respective two-dimensional parallel realities, you could say, or parallel dimensions, can interact with each other. It sort of cements that. But for that, there's a prerequisite, obviously. So, for instance, if a cell isn't assembled as a coherent whole, if there is no membrane, if it's not fully formed, then it does not have access to this kind of multidimensional reality. And by the same token, if humanity doesn't form a collective global organism, it doesn't meet the conditions for experiencing or residing in this five-dimensional reality. So this whole idea of, love thy neighbor like you love thyself, or, these kind of calls for harmony and radical love from Satish Kumar, or all these kinds of people that are now advocating for peace on earth and all that stuff, it is because that is the prerequisite for us to transition into a 5D kind of reality, or higher dimension. But again, take the analogy of what I was saying about the body, your body as a human, and your skin as being a universal translator. A universal translator between a 3-dimensional reality into a 2-dimensional one. At present, humans, because we do not form yet a collective global organism on planet Earth, and we're living here on planet Earth, we don't have what I call a psychic skin. A psychic skin which converts events that happen in a 5-dimensional or a higher dimensional reality into a 3-dimensional linear time one. And so it's as if humanity it's like a body. Basically, you'd have a body without the skin and just organs, the different organs, like your lungs would be there, your heart would be there, your brain would be there, but it wouldn't be part of a coherent whole that had a skin which served as a universal translator between your outer 3D reality and your inner 2D reality. And that's why basically if you have like UFOs, for instance, or any kind of experience like that, most of these beings, their base reality is 5-dimensional. They cannot get here via the 3-dimensional reality because, in 3D, linear time space, they have to travel at the speed of light, and that would take them, I don't know how many millions of years to get to us. But from a 5-dimensional reality, you can get here, no problem. But the problem is, how can you actually interact with our 3-dimensional reality if you're in this higher dimension? And we don't have a universal translator. So if humanity, there's these patches or these organs here, and you have maybe like people, for instance, at Burning Man, people get there, gather in the desert, form a community here, for instance, where all of them or most of them believe in, UFOs or whatever. And as a matter of fact, it's almost like you've created a bridge between the 5-dimensional reality and 3-dimensional reality, and now these UFOs can then drop down here into linear time space and show themselves in one way or another. It's not perfect because you cannot modulate your beliefs that much. You cannot detach yourself completely from materialist science. And so it's going to take the form of just weird moving lights in the sky and whatever. Things that allow these beings to enter into the 3-dimensional realm without putting themselves in danger. And the reason I'm saying that is on Twitter, I've actually posted this actual conversation or transcript of 2 aliens in this UFO that are talking, and they say basically they're coming on into Earth, and they're saying, "Oh my God, what's happening? We're crashing. Oh, but we were here 1,000 years ago and everything was fine. Oh no, humans actually now have changed their level of consciousness, and now they believe in scientific materialism," which is almost like an operating system that you run and that interacts with the Earth's magnetic field, which is the skin, quote unquote, of this planet, of this global organism that is humanity and planet Earth. And that magnetic field serves as this skin that translates outer events into inner events, outer 5-dimensional events into 3D linear time events. But it's not homogeneous. It has these patches and holes because of the very discrepancy between various belief systems in humanity. And when 1,000 years ago, most people believed in magic angels, spirits. That kind of belief system was actually quite, I mean, since it's magic, it's very, very open. It's almost like it's compatible with everything. And so these UFOs or these high dimensional beings, they could drop down into 3D reality, take the form of an angel, no problem. I mean, they just take whatever form that people would believe in, and then they could just resume their own form after that when they exit into their own dimension or reality. Because of that kind of openness. But once you have scientific materialism that conquers the minds of most humans and is the most potent and powerful belief system, then these beings that reside in a 5-dimensional reality have to convert their technology to be compatible with the average of what people believe is possible. And so in the 50s, when you have all these Orwell and all that stuff going on, when these beings again try to visit us and make contact or whatever, or interact with us, it's almost like if you had to convert on the fly something that is running a super advanced version of Linux into MS-DOS, And that's just impossible. So it's almost like if now they're like, oh crap, they don't believe in angels and all that stuff anymore. So first of all, we have to take a corporeal form. So meaning we have to actually create biological bodies for ourselves because they don't believe that anything else exists. Plus, we also have to convert all our technology into mechanical parts that are part of their collective kind of imaginary of what's possible, something like rocket science. And at that point, well, of course, obviously they crash. Obviously, because the human collective in its, sort of consensus kind of belief system didn't have the necessary parts there for, making them be able to drop down to our level of reality and then pop back out. It's almost as if I give this metaphor of like if a cell from the tip of your finger wanted to interact with a unicellular organism on its plane of existence, it would actually have to separate from your finger, lower its level of consciousness, drop down into that 2-dimensional plane. But that is a very risky exercise because then doing it in reverse means maybe you have to actually go through all of the experience of evolving back into the 3-dimensional reality. And so it's best to just like stay on the side, send a few infos from the outside, like just send some information like crop circles or whatever, and then be gone. Because it's extremely risky to drop down to this level. And the only reason you do that is to steer the collective experience of humanity in a direction which is beneficial to the universe as a whole as it experiences itself, because everything affects everything else. And so you could say that like almost the universe is this kind of fractal where every level affects every other level at a point that is very difficult to imagine and to explain. It's almost like two unicellular organisms fighting each other, or two humans quarreling, like a man and a wife or whatever, throwing, dishes at each other. And then two galactic races having an intergalactic war. It's almost like it's the same event, just spanning out into different fractal dimensions or something. And the whole point is to reach harmony. The whole point is to continue not being yourself, not being infinity, and continuously doing that, not being infinity, not being infinity. And in order to do that, you have to harmonize all of those experiences. And sometimes it's better to go and solve the problem between, like let's say, incarnate into those two unicellular organisms and try to make sure that they reach their quarrel, they resolve their quarrel peacefully, and that reverberates into all other dimensions, and fixes the quarrel between the man and the wife, or fixes the intergalactic war that is being fought. And so it's this idea of everything kind of affecting everything else, just like tuning a string and at a lower frequency on your piano, affects how the other strings sort of resonate or enter into resonance. And that is a totally non-linear way of thinking, and that is something that our souls can juggle with, and which we would totally have our minds completely blown. And so the whole takeaway is for us at this point, for humanity, it's important to create this what I call this psychic skin because we don't have one, and we need one in order to interact with the five-dimensional reality and transition into the five-dimensional reality, but not actually experiencing five-dimensional reality as such, because those experiences, again, from this five-dimensional realm, will be converted into our 3D linear time experience as humans. So the idea is not to abandon the body, have a 360 perception and all that stuff that you have in your out-of-body experiences. The whole point is actually to form a coherent whole so that we have a universal translator or skin that manages to convert outer experiences into inner experiences at our level of reality as humans and enjoy experiencing those higher dimensional events in linear time space, in a linear time space form. So it's as if a unicellular organism, instead of like transitioning out of its body and like seeking transcendence, instead, what it was doing is associating with billions and billions and billions of other unicellular organisms, which are in their own two-dimensional reality, and forming this three-dimensional creature, which we call a human, which has a skin that is capable of converting three-dimensional, higher dimensional events into two-dimensional events, but in a way which is very enjoyable to those cells. Because if you think about it, the experiences of every single cell of your body is like a permanent, continuous synchronicity. They're like, oh, every single minute I have oxygen that just spontaneously drops from some place, and I'm being fed, I'm being taken care of, and I'm part of this whole collective, and I have all these crazy adventures with being part of that body. But still, they're having an experience from the point of view, from the perspective of a unicellular, of a cellular organism, not of some kind of transcendental, bodiless kind of creature. And so that's the whole point for humanity right now, is that, right now we are this patchwork of inconsistent cultures and countries and belief systems, and we don't have a coherent psychic skin, which means we cannot experience these higher dimensional realities from a coherent perspective, just like these unicellular organisms wouldn't be able to experience three-dimensional events if they were not part of an organism, if our body was like just this random patchwork of organs without a skin. That just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so you can already experience synchronicities, obviously, by raising your level of consciousness and living as if you're already part of this 5D. But most people have this erroneous idea that 5D is something where you get rid of your body or whatever. No. It's actually you embrace the fact that you're physical, and you grow this kind of universal psychic skin. And this five-dimensional creature is capable then of making sense of all the multi-dimensional parallel realities of every single human, every single choice you did or didn't make, and make sure that all that is tied as a coherent kind of whole. And this psychic skin is really important because right now there's all this debate about whether we are the descendants of aliens or whether actually we're not. We're actually the result of an evolution of apes, or whether we are just gods that were chased from the Garden of Eden, created by God. And all of these versions of our past, if we don't tie them together into a coherent kind of whole, then we will never be able to transition into this 5D experience, because it's almost like, I give this example of like a baby that's born and it doesn't know where it doesn't know who it is, basically. It doesn't know what it is. And it confuses its own body with the body of its parents, and with the body of with the body of a cat, and with all kinds of things that reside in this reality. It doesn't know what is the limit between its outer reality and its inner reality. Well, it cannot have an experience. And right now, if you listen to people that channel the Pleiadians, people that channel Jesus, people that channel reptilians, people that channel God knows what, They all have so many different versions of what it is, what humanity is, where we are from, and all of that stuff. And to me, it's almost like a baby that, or advanced, spiritually advanced cells in the body of a baby that tap into a higher dimension, where they tap into the thoughts of the mother, the thought of the uncle, the thought of a cat, the thought of a dog, and they take those as being part of its identity of who it is. And wouldn't that be confusing? Like, imagine like the heart of the baby thinks it's actually the heart of its mother, and the brain thinks it's the brain of the uncle, and the stomach thinks it's the stomach of the cat, I mean, that just doesn't, it's not going to work. So we have to now sort between what we think is part of humanity, part of our collective kind of experience, of our culture, of our heritage, tied together in a coherent whole, in order to create or grow the psychic skin between an outer, higher dimensional reality where you have all these, creatures, all these aliens, all these people from different dimensions and all that. But we know who we are, and we're not unduly influenced by one or the other. And I give this example in my other videos. It's almost like if a turtle, a fish, a sea turtle, a fish, and a jellyfish were trying to convince the first ever living cell that was about to be born from amino acids, proteins, whatever, convince that cell that it is them, it is the fish, or it is the jellyfish, in order to get some kind of advantage or to tweak its DNA so that it would create the jellyfish or the fish rather than the sea turtle. That's not very useful. And don't forget that what we're trading ultimately here, any element in this reality, in the realm of experience, what we're trading is focused attention. That's all that we're actually trading. That's all the universe is actually trading, and it takes the form of energy exchanges of atoms or whatever you want, but it's ultimately just focused attention. And so it's as if the fish, the jellyfish, or the sea turtle were seeking to gain more quote unquote attention from the very first living cell, so that it would gain some kind of advantage, being more defined or whatever. And it's almost as if all of these entities, it's almost as if the uncle, the cat, the mother, the physician, all of them are trying to seek the focused attention of the baby. And it's almost as if the baby doesn't have enough focused attention turned inwards towards what it is, then its various parts would just dissolve. And it's almost like if these parts would, it's almost like this focused attention would dissipate and give energy to the stuff that is around it, and then die, because it wouldn't be able to maintain a coherent, structure. So all of these UFOs, creatures, whatever you want, channeled beings, whatever you want, ultimately the attention we give them is sometimes the attention that we don't give to ourselves, in creating this barrier or the psychic skin, and to focus the attention on what actually we are and what is humanity. And it's really important to remember this, because giving attention outward to the outside, you can do that once you're functioning as a coherent whole. Then the baby can now start looking at its mother, looking at its father, giving more attention to this or to that, but not before that happens. Otherwise, it would dissolve and dislocate. So it's really important that we develop this common kind of identity, and keep that energy or that focused attention inward, and not dissipate it by being obsessed with everything that is in the fifth dimension. The priority is to reach harmony within, grow the psychic skin, and then that psychic skin will be the universal translator, and we won't have to worry about, any of this. And it'll also be much easier to have discernment. And you could say that, for instance, from the perspective of a baby, well, if it were to crawl into the woods and meet a wolf, then that would be like for us meeting reptilians and being devoured by or being attacked by a higher dimensional species. And obviously, in our three-dimensional reality, there are plenty of things that are dangerous, quote unquote, to a baby or an infant. But the cells inside that baby, what's the point of them completely flipping out because there's a wolf in the woods? I mean, it's just pointless. They will get they have a certain wisdom that is contained within the infant, of like danger or all their experiences of like life, basically growing all the way up to that infant, to be careful about certain things. But you also have to rely on higher dimensional beings, such as the parents of the infant, to actually raise it. And then those messages then trickle down into a two-dimensional messages as a kind of experience for those individual cells. And so once we form a global collective organism, and once we grow this psychic skin, then we also may have certain beings that reside in the fifth dimension that will sort of educate us or raise us as a global collective organism to be able to navigate through a fifth dimensional reality. But they won't be talking to us directly. They'd be talking to the being that we're a part of that has a consciousness of its own. And then those experiences trickle down into our third dimensional reality. We get to experience them, and we give feedback on whether that was pleasant or not to the being that we're a part of. And that being then knows that maybe, okay, that was a painful experience, I don't want to repeat that. Just like an infant that roams around and burns its finger on a flame or something, that experience from its third dimensional perspective trickles down, is converted into a two-dimensional perspective. The cells give feedback to the consciousness of the baby about that experience, that they experienced in the two-dimensional reality, saying that was not pleasant. And then the baby sort of upgrades its own consciousness to say, ooh, okay, let's not repeat that. And the same applies to us. But obviously, for that mechanism to be in place, the baby has to be fully formed. It has to have a skin that serves as this universal translator between the outer world and the inner reality. And that is something that we're lacking. But once we have that, then our collective experience will be borderline magical, because, as I said, the cells inside your body experience permanent synchronicities that never stop, continuously. It's like they're always at the right time, at the right place. They always receive everything they need, like almost magically. And that's the future for us as well, but only if we reach this kind of stage where we grow the psychic skin. So, sorry, this was... I underestimated just how much it would blow my mind in terms of like the complexity of this. And so I hope it was clear. I'm trying to write a book now to... because these improvised kind of sessions are really great, but obviously I don't know what I'm going to talk about fully, and so sometimes I get stuck because I receive this information, I just don't even know how to express it. And writing, I think, is a way to structure it, and to make sure that it's much more coherent and less improvised, less going all over the place. So I hope you found this interesting. Don't hesitate to leave a comment, and share, subscribe, the usual. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and talk to you in the next video.